Hello and welcome to Lansing Pulse. I'm Ken Miller, joined by City Administrator Tim Vandall. Tim, American recovery funds are being distributed now again to local units of government. I don't think we've really heard about it as much this round, but what's the latest on how Lansing's going to utilize these funds?
Well, Lansing is on pace to receive $1.67 million in the recovery funds. And one of the biggest things that the City Council has mentioned is improving high-speed internet access to folks in Lansing. I think there's some pockets in town where internet speed isn't the greatest, and there's times when it's not very reliable also. So I know one of their biggest priorities is improving internet speed for all folks in Lansing. One of the things that's been interesting, though, that we're waiting to hear guidance from the federal government on, because some of the terminology they use in the guidance they've given us is reliable. Well, what constitutes reliable internet? Is it up and running 90% of the time, 95% of the time? Because if you're running 95% of the time, but you're running an internet-based home business, 95% of the time can be a little bit frustrating sometimes. So we're trying to get feedback from the federal government regarding what reliable means. We're also trying to get feedback from them regarding speeds and what speed our baseline is, if that makes us eligible to upgrade to faster internet. So that's one of the big things that we're looking at upgrading with the American Rescue Plan funds. Another item that's eligible that the council has talked about a little bit is improving our sewer capacity, our wastewater lines. And that's one of those items where I think the council is looking at projects that can not only improve our capacity, but maybe jumpstart a little bit of growth also. For any new residential subdivision, sewer lines is a very expensive proposition for any type of local developer.
Right.
So if there's a project that we can partner with someone on where we can assist with the wastewater lines and they can save a little bit of money and build some more houses in Lansing, I think that's something that the city would be open to. But right now, those are the two big things that we're looking at, is improved broadband capability for internet and wastewater lines for our sewer capacity.
Okay, speaking of money, work is continuing on the 2022 Lansing City budget, and every year it basically goes from March to August for that next year's budget. Based on what we've been through in the last 15 months or so, is this year significantly different because of the pandemic and everything associated with it? Not to mention what we just talked about, the American Recovery Funds, the first round that was 6 months ago or so. I mean, it seems to me like the game has changed a little bit for the city budget.
It has, and last year when we did our budget, we were probably a little bit overly cautious. And one of the things that people need to remember is that the figures we use to compile our budget are usually about 2 months old. So when we were working on the budget last June, we were working on April's sales tax figures and April's franchise fee figures and all of those things. And so when we were compiling our budget last year, we really didn't have a great idea of how the pandemic would impact us. Whereas, it really didn't as much as we were worried it would. So I would say this budget, it kind of reminds me of our budget from 2 years ago. Last year we kind of scaled back some transfers and maybe we put off a couple of maintenance projects. We're not doing that this year. Another thing that I want to say too, though, our finance director, Beth Sanford, and we met with Mayor McNeil a few weeks ago, and it was a really positive discussion. And I know Mayor McNeil really challenged us to look at the bottom line, and if there's any waste or anything like that, do what we can to shore that up a little bit and to really see if we can potentially reduce the property tax levy for Lansing citizens. We discussed this at our budget work session last week, and one of the things that we touched on a little bit regarding property taxes is Senate Bill 13, which was recently signed into law by the governor and had bipartisan support. This was a law. It removed the property tax lid on all local units of government, which was a positive thing from our perspective. Because I know one of the things that was always worrisome in years past was if we reduced our property tax levy and then 2 years later we had a major flood or a tornado or something, we wouldn't be able to get that back because of that property tax lid. But since Senate Bill 13 was passed in a bipartisan manner and signed by the governor, that tax lid is no longer there. So I know our city council maybe feels a little bit better about a slight reduction in property taxes. So that's something that we'll be looking at. We've had all of our meetings with department heads. We've talked about their priorities, their projects, equipment they need, and things like that. So it's been a very productive last month and a half or so. And like I said, I think it's shaping up to be kind of like our budget a couple of years ago. And we feel really good about that. The other thing too, some major projects that we're looking at that we have to keep in mind when we compile our budget. Obviously, that intersection, that K7 Eisenhower intersection, that's a really substantial project for us here in Lansing. I know we're also looking at doing some really substantial upgrades for our parks and recreation facilities. We're looking at doing some improvements to our ballparks, a potential splash pad, and if money allows, maybe some improvements to our soccer fields as well. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to keep in mind as we're compiling this budget. But like I'd said earlier, I know Mayor McNeil also really challenged us to look at those revenues, look at those expenses, and see what we can do where we can maybe bring down that mill levy a little bit.
And I think that's important for people, and I think most people realize this, but you need to kind of keep it in the forefront is, we talk about a city budget, working on the one now for 2022, but you're also, staff especially, and certainly the council, you've got to project out years and years. When you're talking about major parks and recreation investments, you're not talking about just 2022, you're talking about probably the rest of the decade.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay, a development update. You mentioned K7 and Eisenhower, a little bit south of there, Harbor Freight.
It's unfortunate. The rain has really slowed that down a lot. We've had a significant amount of rainfall the last 2.5 weeks. But that said, you can still kind of start to see the outline of where the building is going to go based on the dirt work that they've done so far. You can kind of start to see where the stormwater detention pond is going to be on the south side of their building. So it's really starting to take shape. Even beyond that too, there's other development projects that we're working on. We've had a couple of really positive meetings with 2 different prospects for town center properties. One is a more medical field, building in the medical field. Another one is an office type use, but it would be a substantial amount of jobs, and I think it would generate a lot of interest. So there's prospects in town center that we're very excited about as well. So there's a lot of things going on, and I think, this is a long game. We've talked about how this takes years, and you look at what the corner of Eisenhower and K7 looked like 3 years ago, it looks vastly different from how it looks now. I think that's going to be kind of the same thing with town center. I think we're going to get 1 or 2 things get started over there, and then I think in 3 or 4 or 5 years, we're not even going to recognize it anymore. So we're really excited about some of the prospects over there, and there's a lot going on in Lansing. Okay,
we are recording this a little bit after 12 noon on June 1st. And June 1st, of course, is the filing deadline for local political races. It's over with now. What's your take on the filings in Lansing? We did talk to the county clerk a little bit earlier today. So we know who's running for the city council. We also know who's running for school board. But you took a look at the list before you came over. What do you think?
I did. So it looks like there's only one contested race in Lansing. That's Ward 4.
City council.
City council, yep, Ward 4. And that's currently held by Ron Dixon. Councilman Ron Dixon, and I believe a Mr. Clemens is going to be running against him. But beyond that, the other 3 city council races are all unopposed. So there's no need for a primary or anything like that in the Lansing City Council races. It's also been interesting too, looking at that list, and I believe they're going to need a primary for the school board elections.
More than 10.
Yeah, I believe last I saw there were 11 people who had filed for the Lansing School Board. And that's entirely separate from Lansing City Council and everything, but it does look like they're going to need a primary for that. And it's interesting. I want to say some of those seats were also uncontested 4 years ago as well. So I hope that means that our citizens are mostly pretty happy with what's going on in Lansing. But yeah, like we touched on a moment ago, there's only one contested race, that's Ward 4, which is generally in northwest Lansing, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Okay, all right, let's wrap it up with one of our bigger events. In fact, I think it's going to be our biggest event this year. July 3rd, we're going to return to a semblance of normal, the Independence Day's Fireworks Show, and that's going to be back out at Bernard Park this year. If you recall, last year, because of the pandemic, we shot it from Town Center. But it's back out at Bernard Park this year. I got some major bands coming in. I think we're kind of combining what was called the old Lansing days along with the fireworks show now on July 3rd. Talk a little bit, though, I don't want to steal your thunder, talk a little bit about some of the highlights there.
Well, we're really excited to have some live music this year after we weren't able to have that last year. It's going to be headlined by country music rising star Blaine Howard. I think a lot of people know him by his Kansas City Chiefs song, Run It Back. That's one of his more popular songs. But also, local artist Shayla Combs is going to be playing, and she is fantastic, and we're really excited about her playing at the Fireworks Festival as well. So there's going to be food, there's going to be a lot of fun events for kids. Like you had said, we're kind of merging two events into one, and we're going to make it a really fantastic event. Similar to years past, parking is going to be at a premium. So we're encouraging people, come early if you can. I believe after 6 p.m. parking is $1 at the gate. I know the City Council's really been interested in watching how this has been planned. And I want to say we have on the agenda this upcoming week a special event permit for someone to sell wine and beer at the event. So I know there's going to be a lot of things going on at the event this year that we're all really excited about. Like you had said, we're getting back to a sense of normalcy. I think our citizens are excited about this. I'm excited about it, and I know the council's excited about it as well.
Okay, all right, I've been speaking with City Administrator Tim Vandall for Lansing Pulse. I'm Ken Miller.